Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ripe again, back with another police story. In this video, a SWAT team raided my grandma and ended up paying over $3 million. Let's dive right into the video. A couple of months ago, this all began with my grandma minding her own business. She was home alone, falling asleep in front of the TV at around 11 PM when she heard loud banging and knocking coming from the front door. Obviously, given it was so late, she didn't wanna answer it. That is when she heard, "This is the police, open up!" And of course, froze on the spot. My grandma is 82, just for reference, so this sort of situation could have ended a lot worse than it did for her. After a few moments of her not answering the door or speaking up, a SWAT team banged the door down and stormed inside. In came around 10 to 15 SWAT team members, all carrying heavy rifles and an assortment of shields and other weaponry on them. My grandma claims they approached her and immediately handcuffed her and read out her rights. Again, my innocent grandma could do nothing but be gobsmacked and stand in silence as she watched the scene unfold. I guess they took pity on her and allowed her one phone call. She rang me, and when I got over there, she had collapsed on the floor. Obviously, I was furious seeing my 82-year-old grandma in handcuffs unconscious on the floor. The SWAT team had barely done anything to comfort her, merely propped her up on some pillows while they carried on searching the house. "What on earth is going on here?" I demanded, despite the fear from the dozen weapons surrounding me. "Hello, sir, are you her grandson?" one of the officers asked. Yes, and I ask again, "What's going on here?" "Sir, there's no need to yell." "Stop, just stop, let's get one thing out in the open right now. My beloved grandma is currently unconscious, probably scared to death, because a dozen heavily armed men came storming through her house." "Well, I have every right in the world to be yelling. Now explain." "We are here under suspicion of stolen goods. We were given a tip that the missing art from the museum was in this house," the officer continued. "You're joking? You were given a tip and raided the place?" I demanded. The officer nodded at the others to begin removing everything from the house. "Yes, that's how it works, but unfortunately, nothing was to be found, so we'll be on our way." "Unfortunately? Can you even see my grandma right now, or have you gone blind?" I could not believe the lack of care. "Yes, that's unfortunate. However, we cannot predict people's reactions to these events." "Were you aware that an elderly lady lived here?" I asked. The officer sighed as if he had so many better things to be doing. "Yes, we did." "And you did not think to approach the situation a little more carefully?" I was seething at this point, and looking back, I was probably on a fine line towards getting arrested myself. "Sir, this is just how we do things. If you have a problem, you can contact the city." The officer had the nerve to roll his eyes ever so slightly. I was quiet as they left and quickly called an ambulance for my grandma. They arrived ASAP, and while we were in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, I pulled up the CCTV footage I'd installed outside of her home a few summers ago when the neighbor kids were scaring her. The cameras are only for outside and are primarily aimed towards her driveway and front door, but it was enough. You could see and hear the SWAT team giving barely any time for anyone inside to get to the door, which sure might be the whole point of a SWAT team. But given they knew an elderly person lived here, it really didn't make much sense. She wouldn't even be able to get there that fast. We were in and out of the hospital in no time, thankfully. She was not hurt, but just seriously shaken up and stayed with me for the next month, even after we replaced her door and cleaned the place up. So we decided to file complaints with the city council and police department. After weeks of waiting on a reply and chasing up the complaints, we finally got some responses. The council claimed it was a police matter and that they could not hold an opinion, and the police claimed that the team was from out of the city, assigned for a bigger criminal bust, so it was apparently out of their jurisdiction. My email to the right police department was even angrier than the last, given it had been another week and my grandma still felt unsafe, as if the same thing was gonna happen at my house too. Said police department came back with a short apology and nothing more. They did add in at the end that this was just their job to keep everyone safe, which in my opinion completely counteracted any sort of shabby apology they were trying to give in the first place. I went back and forth asking for more of an explanation or something which would feel like a bit of justice, but they were giving nothing. No added information or real acknowledgement of what had happened, so I took to Facebook. Petty? Maybe, but I honestly felt like I was going crazy. There was no way a SWAT raid is usually so callous and careless, right? Well, from the response on Facebook, I guess I was wrong. A few other people spoke out about similar ways they'd been raided and how little was done after an apology or any sort of reconciliation was missing. One person even got a letter when the police found the criminals they were really looking for, as if that was going to make anything better. So naturally, in my angered state, I took it to the courts. I piled up the footage of the CCTV, the hospital records claiming it sent her into shock, which had led to the state of unconsciousness. To keep the city and everyone inside safe, the police department must have SWAT teams. These teams are designed to be a surprise to stop potential criminals from running or finding a way of hiding their merchandise. It's unfortunate that an innocent civilian was harmed during this, but it's just a process towards a safer area, one of the chiefs of the police stated, looking bored. Your Honor, I began. I would argue that it's not simply unfortunate and there was heavy neglect from the police. They cuffed my grandma immediately, even after seeing her frail state. Did they think she would fight the 12 guns pointed in her face? My lawyer stepped in and said, "We think she deserves compensation for this act. She was sent into a shock which led to her becoming unconscious." And as you can see from all the footage, she was left in this state by the officers who walked out once they'd done their search without a care in the world. The judge looked at all the evidence in front of her and to my absolute shock and horror and stated, ruling in favor of the city. Before banging her gavel, as social media does these days, it went mad. People were furious about the events and the fact that neither the police or the judge were siding with my poor grandma. A few very small riots broke out in protest, but mostly the harassment to the police department was just online. However, this seemed to be enough as a higher chief got involved and reviewed all the footage and deemed our case worthy to be heard by a higher court. In an outcome that even I could not have dreamed of, my grandma ended up winning $3 million in the case, mostly thanks to the media attention and the stress it was causing all the departments. My grandma split most of the money between the other victims of similar raids, something I selfishly admit I wouldn't have done. She's still scared at times. I see her watching the door in fear of something happening. Alas, she is slowly recovering from the big shock but refuses to be left home alone more often than not. I guess she got her justice, but a part of me still knows that without the media attention, she would have been left in the dust like all the others. And the next one is titled Divorced Because of a Name. Hello Reddit, this title might look funny, but it's an actual problem between me, 23 female, and my husband, 24 male. We've been dating for a year, been married for 2, I got pregnant like 7 months ago, so recently we started discussing a name for the baby. Ever since we found out it's gonna be a girl, my husband wants to name it like his ex's name. It's not any ex, but the one he dated for a long period of time and loved the most. In the beginning of our relationship, we had many problems because of her, but she moved away, so the problems went away. He really loved her and he never hid that from me, but I thought it was over once she moved away. Now he made it clear that he wants the baby to have that name and I can name the second child. When I asked him why does he want that name so badly, he just said because he and his ex didn't work out doesn't mean he doesn't want something to keep reminding him of her. He does not understand how much it is affecting me and keeps saying it's just a hormone. Is he still in love with the ex, or it's normal that he wants to name our child like that? And yeah, ripe stars, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Do you think OP is being the a-hole here or not? I would say wanting to name your baby after your ex is certainly not normal. Unless your ex has like the same name as your mom or grandma or whatever. Then I could maybe understand it, otherwise definitely no. The comments on Reddit said, I knew a woman who wanted to name her baby after an ex. Well, she ended up stabbing the current boyfriend. Just putting that out there. Another commenter said, I'm more concerned about his lack of respect for you as his partner, his number one, his wife. You might try relationship counseling, but I suspect his disrespect extends beyond the baby naming issue. Another person said, tell him that you want to name your second child after one of your previous F-buddies because the sex was so good and you just want to be reminded of it even though things didn't work out. Like seriously, what the hell is he thinking? I don't know your husband's feeling towards his ex, but it's not normal. Another person said, wow, he just told you you are second best. He blatantly is saying that he's settled with you. No way. Update to the story. I'm sorry for the late update, but the last few weeks have been hell for me. I'm gonna write a quick update here, mostly to thank all those people for opening my eyes about everything, and I also apologize for my English. So I followed through most advice in the comments, from calling our friends asking for help, asking his mom, talking to him, and calling the ex. This post blew up in 2 days, and then I decided to show him comments where everyone said we should not name our child after an ex. He said, I'm listening to random social media strangers, instead of my husband, and called me so many bad names, refuses to talk about it, and still wants to name our child like his ex. Next thing I do is call his mom and mutual friends. His mom called me immature and said it is just a name and I should only care about delivering the child healthy and not argue with him over something stupid. Our friend said they don't want to get in between us and suggested therapy as well. I was really desperate, so I did something I never would. I called the ex. She didn't sound surprised at all by it and said she kind of knew he was gonna name the child after her, but she explained it fully because he could not look me in the eyes and say all that. Two of them had an agreement while they were still in love to name their children after each other if they don't work out. She left him and obviously grew out of it and said she would never name her child after him because it's absurd, but she wasn't surprised that he still wants to do that. When I asked her why does she say that, well, here comes the shock. My husband tried getting in contact with her via Facebook several times, asked her to meet up, etc., and she kept refusing because he is a married man. Here you can see that she's not a bad person, and by the way, for anyone who asked, her name is Aurora, and I wouldn't mind just naming my child Aurora because it's a beautiful name, and she is not a bad person, but I don't want to raise someone who will remind my husband of his ex. I thanked her for telling me the truth and asked her to inform me if he tries to contact her again. I confronted my husband about it and told him that I knew the truth. Being an a-hole as he is, he admitted and said there's nothing wrong with it, baby is mine, she will look like me, and at least he gets to name it as her like he promised he would. I told him it's nonsense, and even Aurora said it's stupid, but he stuck to his decision. We didn't talk much and he spent days and nights out with his single friends. Pretty soon I get a call from Aurora and she tells me that he called her from his friend's phone and told her that he is single now and asked to meet up and that he would fly up just to see her. After all those years with no contact with her, marriage with me, future daughter, etc., she is still in his mind and he wants to meet her. I'm completely broken, divorce is the only thing in my mind, but it would be so stressful with the pregnancy and everything else. I guess I wanted to be blind with him. Thanks to Reddit though, I at least won't spend my life with someone who doesn't even love me. I don't want to name my child Aurora because it would forever remind me of this incident and I cannot think about names, so please help me out. Someone in the comments said, sorry, it sounds like you're still in the crap. The commenter said, I'm sorry, but it sounds like the person you married wishes that he married someone else. It's really effed up, but I don't think he loves you. He may have never loved you. He may have just settled for you. But there are 3 wonderful things ahead of you. You can be grateful that Aurora has been honest with you. That's really helpful. You can be grateful you learned the truth about your ex now and not in 3, 5 or 10 years time. You can be grateful that now you are able to take back your life and work on creating a happy life in the future. And the next one is a petty revenge story. My kid's mom, my ex, is a control freak. We have shared care, weak about arrangements. She demands to know her daughter's every movement, texts constantly, checking up on her, and a load of other overbearing nonsense. Which is one of the reasons I left her, by the way. My daughter is now well into her teens and fed up with the control. The ex tries to track her via various apps on my daughter's phone, however, my daughter is savvy enough to disable this when she wants, so we went camping for a week in the summer with my new partner and her kids, and I told the ex exactly where we were camping and our planned travel route. My daughter had enough of the control and texted and turned off her phone as we left for the trip. We had to detour a bit due to roadworks, and soon I got a text from the ex demanding to know where we were going and why our daughter was not responding. I was surprised that she knew we were off track a bit, and once we got to camp we go looking and sure enough find an AirTag hidden in my daughter's bag. Both myself and my daughter were pretty unimpressed and almost dumped it in the garbage. Instead though, we decided to have some fun. We were camping in a small town with a post office. We bought a large potato on which my daughter drew an angry face, put the AirTag and the potato inside a sealed post bag and posted it to her mother. Over the next 6 days of camping, I received a series of increasingly agitated calls and texts from the ex about our whereabouts. She was freaking out as the tag traveled from our remote town through another state and slowly back to her address. A week goes by fast and we head home. Then dropped the kids off to their mothers and almost forgot about the package as it hadn't arrived apparently. A few days later, I get an excited call from my daughter who was grounded. The post bag had turned up at least a couple of weeks after sending. The potato had gone bad, turned to a foul-smelling mush in the bag that upon opening had spilled on the living room carpet, leaving a rotten mess with an AirTag in the middle. Even better though, it was the ex who opened it. I wish I had been there to see her face. Apparently, it was worth the grounding. The ex still tries to control and track my kids, but does not have much luck. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. My local HOA seems to have a big thing with the neighborhood looking as uniform as possible. I can understand that to a degree, but also they need to realize that sometimes special circumstances need to take more importance than that. Now, my son is 5 years old and has autism, so for him things are not exactly as easy to explain to him as it would be explaining it to other kids in the neighborhood. One thing that he had been doing constantly was getting out of the house and running right into the street. He could not understand the concept of cars hitting him and needing to be careful and staying on the lawn. One time he managed to get out of the front door when I was bringing something in from the car, and I saw him in his PJs running into the middle of the street. I had to drop everything to grab him and saw a car was going down the street at that moment. I knew that I needed to protect my son in addition to trying to work on teaching him about safety. And while of course locking the front door would always be the first line of defense, it worried me to think that it was still possible for him to just get out of that door and then be able to get right into the street. Because of that problem, I wanted to install a gate and fence around the front of my property so that even if he got out of the front door, he would be stopped by the fence. Or, of course, as a kid, he would want to play outside, and this way he could without me needing to be ready every 2 seconds to sprint and stop him from running into the street. Now that I got that out of the way, let me go back to talk about what this has to do with the HOA. Since nobody else has a fence, I needed to fill out an application and wait to get permission from them to build the fence. I make sure to highlight the fact that I don't want it for the looks of it. I wanted to protect my autistic son. I heard nothing back, and the rules state that if I didn't get anything telling me that I couldn't within 30 days, it was just as good as getting told yes. Still, I was cautious and waited 60 days before I finally decided that they must not have cared and had the fence built in my yard. Now I just want to take a moment to say that I still wanted my property to look good, and the fence that I picked out was not crazy or anything. It was a white picket fence that matched the rest of my house. This way it looked like it belonged there, and I had a professional install it, so everything looked really good. It was not long before I kept getting messages from the HOA that my fence was not allowed and giving me fines. I was actually a little bit worried because I know from other stories that the HOA can be brutal, and I did not want anything bad to happen about them. I wanted to be proactive, and I sent back a letter explaining about the 30-day period of not hearing anything back and telling them again about my son. I got no response from them except for more fines and even a note saying that if I didn't remove my fence, I was going to have my house foreclosed. While I knew they probably didn't have that power, I was terrified and did not know what to do. The fines kept coming in, and I was finally given a letter saying that I was going to be taken to court by them for violating the rules. I ended up having to take the fence down while they took me to court, and I was stuck trying to defend myself. Keep in mind, this entire time I was trying to contact any member of the HOA and getting fully ignored by them. I did not feel comfortable going to one of their homes or anything and wanted it to be done professionally. I don't know if they thought ignoring me was going to make their case stronger, or if they lost my application and thought I never filed one. I really wanted to get this settled out of court, but it didn't seem like that was going to happen, so I was forced to get a lawyer and go up against them and their HOA lawyer. At this point, as much as I wanted to get the green light to reinstall my fence, I had bigger problems to worry about. The fines had added up to over $1,000 at this point, which was money I did not have. Plus, if they could get me kicked out of my house, then me and my son would have nowhere to go. Even just to go to court, I had to drive an hour away to drop my son off at my mother's house. When it was going on, I'm not going to lie, I did not fully know what was going on. I'm not great at understanding legal talk, and that is the main reason that I got a lawyer. They were showing the papers that I signed and agreed to when I moved into the HOA and highlighting the parts that involved my fence. Then they showed pictures of my fence and how the fines they sent were perfectly acceptable in these guidelines. I was scared, and then the judge asked me to explain why I had built the fence in the first place without getting the approval from the HOA. I basically told him the whole story, and when the fact my son was autistic dropped, it was as if everything changed. I guess they didn't bother to tell their lawyer that detail, but mine was using it to his full advantage. He said that because my son had a disability, his needs were protected by the ADA laws, and that overrode anything that I signed with an HOA for. Then he said that their repeated letters without giving me any chance for communication was considered harassment, and that I was persuaded with fear to take the fence down after all of that. It was obvious their lawyer had no way to counter the fact that the fence was to stop my son from running out into the street and putting himself and others in danger. We won at the end of the day, and the fines were basically thrown away. There was still one issue though that needed to be resolved, and that was the fact that they had made me take down the fence. A fence that was not exactly cheap to have a professional put up in the first place. The lawyers both agreed that if I did not pursue any of the individuals for harassment, then they would use the funds from HOA fees and use it to rebuild my fence. Honestly, that was perfectly fine by me, and before I knew it, my son was able to run around in the front yard again without being in danger. I honestly don't know why they were so against the fence, because it was not like it stuck out like a sore thumb or anything. The HOA is pretty quiet in our neighborhood overall, and I really hope that is the last encounter I'm going to have with them. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.